Hello, I'm Lucas Kendall. This is my friend and co-host Charlie Vignola, and our special guest today is manager Dan Seco from Empirical Evidence, who is a perfect guest for us. He's a lit manager, and he has very high standards in clients and material, and very low standards for who he talks to on YouTube. So he's perfect.
Thanks for having me, Lucas. Thanks, Charlie. That's a heck of an intro. Thank you.
I worked on it all week. But first, I want to just let our 10 listeners know that Charlie missed last week, and he's with a different background because he had a death in the family, and we're very sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I'm in Northern California, so that's was a little change in scenery, and I'll probably be up here for a little while, so I'll try to put a movie poster or something in the back next time we see each other.
Okay, so so we're here, and we're happy to talk to you, Dan, and I don't want people to click off or click away. I want them to know that we're going to give them information to help them become rich and famous. It may not, it won't work, but we should tell them. And here, because I watch almost all those Scripts and Scribes interviews, and I learned so much. There's a website you should check out called Scripts and Scribes. They have a YouTube channel, and they have dozens of manager interviews. But what I noticed, and I haven't told Kevin this yet, is that they're almost all about the business side, which is essential to learn. But let me read you something that I saw on like Twitter, and I kind of couldn't believe it, or I might have seen it on Facebook. It's from one of the coverage contest companies called Shore Scripts. It goes, "Have you written a great screenplay only to be faced with a brick wall when you try to get it into the hands of managers, agents, and production companies? Well, it's time to show them what you've got. Shore Scripts has," and then it's all their credentials and all the reasons why you should enter their contest. But I was like, wait a minute, wait, go back there. It said, "Have you written a great screenplay?" Because they know that everyone reading that will go, "Yes, of course I have. All my screenplays are great." But it's not true, or else they would. I mean, can you tell us what's going on here? You're the expert.
So I deal with Shore Scripts from time to time. They put scripts on my radar. So just gonna say, thanks Shore Scripts for always sending me quality material.
I've had good feedback. I've had useful feedback from them, especially compared to some of their competitors.
I mean, but if you have a great script, and I think this is the question that you're asking, do you need to go the contest route? I mean, I think it's a great script kind of finds a way. If you have a great script, it's getting read by multiple people, and then people want to be in the business of sharing great scripts with others, in the sense that it kind of operates as currency. Like, I remember when I was an assistant or an intern or coming up, and you get your hands on a great script, it's the easiest way to make yourself valuable to the people above you. And I think like even other writers want to do solid for others kind of coming up, that if someone has something that's truly great, you move it along, and then it just starts to snowball from there. Is that what you were going for?
That's all true. And it's frustrating to me because I'm one of those people thinking, why, of course I've got a great screenplay, but it's not getting me the results I want at the blacklist, or people aren't asking even to read it, or some people are reading it and saying, well, that's really good, but it's not for us. So it's hard to figure out. My question, and this is why I'm so happy to have Charlie on the show, because he spent 30 years working for Bruckheimer. Do people even know the difference between a not great and a great script? And I think they don't, because I read stuff a lot too. And so much stuff, the concept's not good, the clarity is all over the place. And I think it's even more basic than that. And I finally realized it within the past week. Most amateur writers are interested in movies, but to be a professional, you have to be interested in people. And I don't think people really make that leap. They're so interested in recreating Star Wars or Indiana Jones or the Goonies or the stuff that they love, that they don't stop and they don't think about how real people would behave and what makes real people tick, even if it's a kid's movie or a fantasy movie, or sometimes especially in a fantasy movie.
Sure. I would say most scripts are not great. Most scripts that if you initially think are great are probably more very good. Great is something that's reserved for very few scripts. I think for me, working with my clients, it's to something evoke the right emotional response. Everything I'm doing in terms of the going through ideas to going through treatments, outlines, first drafts, the final draft, is thinking about the executives and producers that are going to be reading this script. The majority of the things that I work on are to take out in the spec market to places that are already fans of the writers that I'm working with. And these are people at major production companies, some of them with deals at studios or at streamers, and they have the goods to get it done. The caveat is these people are getting hundreds, maybe more, of scripts on their radar per week. So the expectation going in is that most things are a pass. So how do we game that system to make the reading experience enjoyable so that they keep going, to even start the conversation of perhaps this is something that can evolve into a project? And for me, being at a boutique company, but also knowing what the bar is, having worked at CAA and other places, I'm only looking to take great things out. A lot of managers take out things that are somewhere between very good to bad. I'm not privy to that. The second I start doing that, not that everything I take out sells, but I think that every project I take out needs to generate interest and fans for my writer, or I'm not doing a good job servicing my clients.
Charlie,
That's a good answer. That's
yeah.
a good answer, because I was going to say that my manager's philosophy is the same as that, which is not everything they go out with sells, but it has to either be a great writing sample, something that's going to make them interested in you as a writer. It does you no good to throw crap against the wall and hope for the best. Maybe once upon a time you can get away with that, but in modern Hollywood, that's really not the way to go. I was going to a few early questions that I'm sure people don't know the answer to. Dan, you're a manager. So for a person that doesn't understand the difference between a manager and an agent is at a fundamental level, explain what the difference is between a manager and an agent as far as representatives go for a writer.
Great question. I would start by saying that if I showed up the way I'm dressed right now to CAA, I'd probably be let go on site, meaning that like traditionally agents are, suit and tie, buttoned up, a little more business forward. And then managers, for me, and I know many managers deviate from this, managers are hands-on from a creative and development standpoint. So why I became a manager after going through the agency route is that I was a writer, I was a journalist, I was a sports journalist and an editor. And I think some of that skill set of being able to kind of put on a cap and think like a writer, but also aim to make writing better from the editorial standpoint is really how I approach a lot of how I interact with my clients. So I guess the simplest answer is a manager is going to be more day-to-day, hands-on, creative-driven, going through ideas, giving notes on scripts, and really trying to make a writer better. So I always view that like an up-and-coming writer should try to get a manager first, get to the point where you're making a lot of progress, making money, and at that point, the agencies will start to be interested. Agents are more wheeling and dealing, I guess, setting up meetings, but really taking projects to town, previously trying to package projects by adding a director, adding talent, and really creating something that's undeniable so that when it does go to market, there's many interested buyers and they try to drive up the price. So we'll say agents, business and money-driven, managers, creative development, but there's so much overlap. I think that I wear so many hats that having come up working at Resolution, Rest in Peace, and CAA, I know what to do and not to do on the agency side. So not all of my clients have agents, even though there are many that could. Try to save them a buck. I also like that side of things. Not that like I should be saying this on the record that I'm doing what an agent should do because they have a particular accreditation with the state of California, but I love it. It's like the joy of developing something and then seeing it kind of go out and manipulating that whole process, the entire ordeal of idea to film premiere. That's fun. It's fun to be involved with.
I understand that some of the old school understandings of the difference between agents and managers. One is that a manager can be a producer.
Yes.
And an agent can't attach themselves as producer to a client's project the way a manager can. And often when a manager does that, then whatever commission that a writer would be paying to the manager might be returned once the project gets made and the manager is making a producer's fee. The other one, and I'm not sure if it's still, but it's related to your accreditation. comment that managers didn't get clients work. In the old days, it was agents that got the clients the work and booked them and sent them into pitch sessions and all that kind of stuff. Managers didn't really or weren't supposed to be getting their clients work. That was what the agent was supposed to do. You can explain a little bit of how you kind of thread that needle, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some blurred lines there. And when there is an agent and a manager on a team with a writer, I think it's a shared responsibility sometimes, in the sense that if a writer has two sets of reps, sometimes the agents do weigh in creatively and give notes, and that's great. I love agents that are hands-on in that sense. But even with an agent involved, even at a major agency, sometimes we are working in concert with them to do submissions, set up meetings. It's really like kind of just an all hands on deck kind of approach, making sure that everyone is justifying their seat at the table, even if that blurs the lines of how things were established back in the day.
Now, when you were talking about the fact that one of the major things you enjoy doing as a manager is helping develop the material, does that go as far as, I know people who have managers who require their clients to audition ideas, pitches, log lines before they actually sit down and write a full screenplay? Whereas with agents, I feel it's more, I write what I want to write, I give it to the agent, it's your job now to go out there and sell that. Are you somebody that expects your writers to kind of audition ideas before they sit down and write them with you?
Yeah, and look, I know that that's a gray area of like, who am I to say what you should be writing? But I think it's taking my understanding of the marketplace and giving the writer a sense of why or why not. And also sometimes it's, hey, this makes sense given that you just did this. Let's do this 6 months from now. So it's really just being a sounding board, serving in a advisory way. I'm not going to like fight a client tooth and nail and be like, there's no way you're doing this idea. I think it's just more of a conversation and kind of just speaking from experience of what's moving in the market, but not chasing things. It's more of just like, hey, this isn't really playing right now. Let's see if things start to open up. You have a lot of fans that are looking for this. This idea kind of outweighs that one in terms of its viability at the moment. So it's a constant conversation. Sometimes an idea from like 2 years ago might resurface and make more sense. We just keep a list of things and revisit from time to time.
How many clients do you have?
Yeah.
So as a company, we have about 50. I would say that I have somewhere between 25 to 30.
And we should say your company's Empirical Evidence. Of course, I forgot and didn't read notes.
All good. Yes, Empirical Evidence, management company, writers and directors for film and TV, but we also have podcast creators, playwrights, short story writers, a little bit of everything.
Do you, I know agents obviously have the sort of the grid of all the open writing assignments around town. Is that something that you also track or not really?
It is. I mean, we definitely have more than a handful of clients that are active in that space, that have fans that are looking for them. I think that comes down to relationships with folks at other companies. Don't want to give away my sources just to protect them, but it's the sharing of information that allows me to have access to that.
Okay. And in terms of what you said about what is the marketplace look like, I mean, I know, back in the day, it was like, well, the head of Paramount is looking for like a naval adventure after Captain Phillips. So, we should try to come up with naval adventures. Do you right now get a sense of like, well, what Netflix is looking at compared to what Amazon is looking at, compared to what Hulu is looking at, compared to what Paramount Plus is looking at? Is there some sort of like general sense of either the genres or the types of films that the various studios and streamers are looking at, and you're triangulating all that in your brain? So when you're talking to your writer clients, you're like, well, just FYI, Netflix is looking to do sort of things in the sort of teen rom-com vein or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's more of barriers to entry than the specificity of genre. So I would say if someone asked me, what's the deal with Netflix right now, I would say that it's tough, that they are reevaluating from a strategic standpoint. And I also worked at Netflix as a consultant, so I have friends that work there. I have a sense of how the different silos work, why they say yes to certain things and why they say no to others. Granted, that was a few years back, but I think it still carries some weight. So for us, like, Netflix is tough. Netflix, I would need to have a huge package, big time filmmaker that's on their approved list, probably 2 actors or actresses to really start to move the needle. Even if it's a spec script that has interest from like 10 to 15 other places, unless I have that sure thing, I'm not going to bet on Netflix being a viable option. Amazon, I think the Amazon MGM of it all, still waiting there for a little bit more certainty. I think that for us, Amazon is more of a, if we have something great at a festival, they could be a really cool option if they're excited about the filmmaker. So I would say for us, like I view Amazon as filmmaker driven. If we get a project that we can attach a cool director to, we might start to have a conversation with Amazon at that point. I think for me right now, we really like Paramount Plus, knowing that it could be big Paramount, it could be Paramount players within that, and then Paramount Plus, knowing that like there's a few different ways to navigate it. And I think for genre projects, there's an excitement there in terms of the production companies that have deals with Paramount wanting to kind of feed that mandate. So I guess like that's like kind of a taste of how we're seeing things at the moment without going too deep.
Sure. And so, do you? It sounds like everybody else, you're feeling like you need to be a producer and put together packages with talent, whether it's a director, whether it's actors. You're pre-packaging before you bring it to these people because you have to get the ball rolling, the snowball rolling, so that there's momentum behind it. And a naked screenplay is very difficult to set up in 2022.
Yeah, I would say I'm hitting year 10 of being in the industry, maybe 5, 6 years of being a rep. I never wanted to be the manager that slapped a producer title onto everything I touched because I felt like, A, I didn't really know that side of the business. B, didn't want to preclude my clients from bigger opportunities. I think there's some managers that navigate it really well. I think Adam Kohlbrenner is an example of a manager that legitimately is a producer. So I think like I'm trying to learn from someone like that, and he's definitely taken me under his wing and shown me the ropes of how you can justify being a part of things and be value added and tread lightly, knowing that like not every great project means you just call yourself a producer and get in the way of progress to production. We've really started to dip our toes into intellectual property, short stories. We have a guy that vets articles for us. So we're trying to, kind of live in that world. And I think when we can do that, bring it to the writer and start to piece things together, it feels a little bit easier to say, hey, we're going to be producers on this one. But again, look for way bigger people to drive things and just use it as an opportunity to learn, protect the clients, and help move the project forward.
Okay, here's a big question, and I'm sure this is a question that everybody who's watching this show is interested in, because I get this all the time from all the years I was at Bruckheimer. I've got what I think is a great script. My friends have read it. I've gotten some, professionals, or I've gotten some consultation. I think it's in really good shape. There's a gulf between me and my house in Des Moines, Iowa, and anybody that's out in Los Angeles that's a representative looking for material. Your entire job is requiring you to have pipelines to potential material you might be able to package and sell. So, and over the years, you've developed those pipelines, the people that you trust, the taste that you trust, that kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be specific, but in general, if I'm that writer who's like, I don't even know how I get my material from my computer to someone like yourself, if not necessarily you, but like, what am I missing? What are the steps in between that are going to get it to you? How do you get material right now? Who do you turn to? Like, where does it come from? It's not always contests, obviously. So, yeah.
I think there's 2 answers to that question, and I'll start with the sliding scale of how potential clients are put on my radar, if that works.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'd say at the top of the scale, and this is rare, but like someone at CAA gives me a call. They're like, hey, Dan, got this guy. He's ready for a manager. We kind of signed him before he had a manager. Thought your tastes would be aligned. You should read him. Great. CAA, he's already a CAA client. He's vetted. That's awesome. That happens every once in a while, and it's everyone from CAA to APA to Verve to whatever. And that's great. I think like the idea that someone already has agency representation means that they have a sense of how things work. They know how to deal with a rep to some degree, and maybe they're making money. Makes my life a little bit easier. Do I sign everyone that's put on my radar that way? No, I actually probably pass on a lot of them. But
it's like being pre-approved for a mortgage. It's
absolutely.
coming to you with people that you trust.
Great place
already.
To start. Yeah. I'd say a step below that would be it coming from executives. Good example, kid I went to high school with, or he was a little bit younger than me. He's an executive at a major production company. We have the commonality of same hometown in New Jersey. Great. That's awesome. He's like, hey, there's another kid that's from our area. He just left a big management company, super funny. I'd vouch for him. Take a look at his script. Read his script. It was awesome. Met him. Great guy. Signed him yesterday. So awesome. We're super excited. This is a guy has fans around town. Can sell a show, can get staffed, and probably can live in the feature space. So someone that we're excited to be working with, really glad that we signed him. Tier below that would be clients recommending other people. So the higher level the client that's recommending someone, the more excited I'm going to be. And I definitely signed a few people that way. Or it's director and writer friends that I don't represent that say, hey, so-and-so just had a film at Sundance. You should take a look. Great. Meet people that way. Again, all of this is relationship driven. Below that would be the companies around town that do contests. Cover flies like, hey, I got this guy. He was a sports journalist just like you. Take a look. Great. That's awesome. Or I'm a judge for a contest. Literally a judge for a contest. Got the batch of the top 10, went through them before the list even comes out. We're going to meet with a writer next week and hopefully sign her. Below that, I'm going on the blacklist. I'm going on Coverfly. I'm going on Roadmap Writers, and I'm proactively looking for different types of people. It's usually looking at the log line to see if it's a type of project that I'm interested in, and then taking a look at the
Can I pause you there, Dan?
Yeah.
Log lines helping flag what you're interested in. Which the log line meaning basically the idea of the screenplay.
Yes.
How important is that to you in all of these cases when it comes to what you're going to bother to read at all?
It's super important.
Yeah.
It's the easiest way to pique my interest. I think a bad log line can be damning. A great log line can get you signed. It's just my time is the greatest commodity. Getting me to commit to something, getting me to read an entire script that's not my client's at this point is really tough. There has to be a reason why I'm doing it. I mean, granted, I certainly help writers from time to time that are not my clients. I am a judge for things. But when it comes to considering a potential client, a bad log line could mean that I don't even read the script.
Right. Lucas and I talk about this in our show all the time. And from all the years at Bruckheimer, that was the key thing, which is before anything at all, if that idea isn't clear and succinct and intriguing enough, it could be, the most amazing script in the world. It's just never going to make its way past a bad log line or a mushy log line or something that sounds too generic. It's got to grab me in that raw form to get it above my radar. And
I think about it like this. I want to be able to read a log line and get a sense of, can I guess what I can do with this? Meaning, if it's something based on a true story and period, probably not going to get made. But could it be a sample that opens up the door for open writing assignments, meaningful generals, and maybe it's a blacklist play at the end of the year? Great. Is it an actioner that could attract A-list talent based on the concept? Like, that's where my mind goes. And I know that's it's a gray area of whether I'm completely right or completely wrong, but great log lines can kind of tee up expectations. And I think, again, makes it more exciting for me to know that something could be actionable based on the first impression.
That's a great answer, and I agree with that 100%. I think
I guess going back to that original set of questions. So below what I mentioned before, I do respond to queries. People hit me up on Twitter.
How many do you get a day?
Anywhere from 5 to 30.
How many do you respond to?
It depends. I only want to respond to ones that I want to read.
How often is that?
It can be 5 times a week. It could be 5 times a day. It just, there's no rhythm to it. I guess like, okay, if I'm doing a podcast, right, and I'll get a flood of them, and I'll be very particular about the ones that I kind of reach out to. I always like the queries that are specific to me, in the sense of, hey, I saw you on Lucas's podcast, or hey, I follow you on Twitter, or hey, I know that you're a cancer survivor, or whatever. It just shows like it's not one of 1,000 queries that are going out. I'd like to get a sense that someone's done at least 2 minutes of research about me, like that they could see a path forward with me as the rep, knowing that I'm at a boutique company, I'm not 3Arts, I'm not anonymous content, having a set of expectations of, if this person was interested in me as a potential client, this could make sense, rather than it just being a scattershot and hope for the best.
And when those queries come in past the, hey, Dan, heard you on a podcast, you seem like a cool dude, would you read my script? The next question would be, what's your script about? Like, do you vet the log line or the idea?
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably have like 2, 3 log lines, not 10. 10's a red flag. You have to be able, as a writer, to discern what's your best work. And if you think that all 10 are the same, then you're probably not progressing in the right direction.
It's like the guy in Taxi Driver. Remember the gun dealer? And then he's like, want some uppers,
Oh.
downers, downers. I got a pink slip on a Cadillac. Want a Cadillac?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like when you're trying to sell everything, you sell nothing.
Right.
I want to go back to the emotional experience. I want to know how you do that. I want to start by saying, so you were somebody who I queried after I saw you on a YouTube show, and you were very cool, and you actually read some stuff of mine. And so I pulled up this old email you sent me. Don't worry, there's nothing bad about it. This is from September 26, 2020, so almost 2 years ago. And you said, took a look at both. Skyfighter, which is a script of mine based on a short, needs to be perfect to work, and I just didn't flip out for it on the page. Decent though. Who, which was another script, a thriller, is stronger, but it's not quite there to be able to sell. Right now it is good. Needs to be very good to move the needle for a manager. You certainly have the potential to get there, so I'd keep going with both of these. Thanks, best Dan. Now, first of all, I want to say thank you that you even took that amount of time to be responsive, encouraging, because almost nobody does. But I'm mentioning this because at the time I sent those to you, I had no idea how to make them any better. For me, every single comma was perfect. The distillation of each of them was like 3 years work. And I was just like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to make them any better, because I don't know what I could change without just blowing it up. And what happened, because obviously it didn't work, and I respected you as being not a dummy, I thought, well, I'm not seeing something here. And gradually what I saw was that I needed to reconceive each project, which I did. And it took a very long time. And I realized, oh, I've got too many characters. Oh, I picked the wrong protagonist. I've got the wrong set pieces, because I was seeing the pieces were not connecting, and they weren't going deep into the subject matter. What I used to like to say in the show is that the scripts were wide and shallow. They weren't narrow and deep, and you want narrow and deep. But there was nobody to teach me this. And I used some of those coverage contests and coverage companies, and I get responses that were sort of, this, that, maybe, but nobody really says, look, kid, you got the wrong protagonist. Kid, I was 46, but nobody says the concept, you did the wrong concept, because the thing that the guy wants does not come out of the concept, because the concept implies a different thematic identity. And then you go, oh, the whole thing was wrong because of this choice that I made that I took for granted. So I just want you to see if you'll agree with everything I just said.
But I will say this, as a unique moment in time, right? September 2020, things were really rough in the industry. There's no vaccines at that point. There's so much like uncertainty with COVID. So I guess I had a little bit, I wasn't going to meetings, and I guess Zooms were starting to become a thing and whatnot. But I think I was allowing myself to spend more time on potential clients. I was being courteous. I was just trying to do the decent thing, but also like trying to just fill my day, I think is just the reality. Am I sending that back to anyone these days that's sending me a query? No, I'm not. Mostly to just protect myself, mostly to just not get into a war of words with people. I think generally speaking, people are decent. I just don't have the energy or the bandwidth for like what do you mean? Like you're wrong. Like it's just not productive. You, Lucas, you handled yourself the right way. And I think that's why I've always been happy to chat with you, even though you're not my client, and try to steer you in the right direction and perhaps protect you from other managers and things like that. So I think like, what's the overarching thing? How you carry yourself, how you present yourself, how you engage, like the more respectful and professional you can be, the more you're going to get out of a relationship with someone like myself, even if it's not about becoming my client.
Well, I appreciate everything you just said, and I felt very lucky. I do feel very lucky. Hey, there's an intruder.
That's my wife.
Intruder. All right. You've been a really cool guy, but I don't expect going forward to, access you at all. And I don't think it's fair that anybody else should. I think what I was trying to ask is that I had to teach myself how to better create a concept and go into the concept. Is there anything you can speak to generically about the thought process to do that? Because that's what separates amateurs from pros.
I think I used to believe that I could take good writers and make them great, and I don't believe that I can. I think I can.
Why?
Because I don't think that my job allows me to invest that amount of time in that many people. I think people have to be a little bit further along than I had anticipated, maybe earlier on in my career, in the sense that like I'm not producing every project. There's only so much time and money to be made by selling scripts and staffing people and whatnot. So I think like it comes down to a business decision that I'm not a teacher at a film school. I'm not a script doctor. I'm a little bit of everything, but I can't be 90% development. A lot of it is networking and putting people out there and reading. I have to be able to dip my toes in many different boxes rather than trying to teach people how to write. And for full disclosure, I've written one screenplay in my life. I was 21 years old. It was terrible. I did not go to film school. My education is 10 years working in the industry, being a reader at so many companies across the board. But the reality is I've read thousands of scripts, and that has been my foundational knowledge of how to operate within the industry. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm self-aware that I do think I give good notes, but I have to be judicious with how I use my time.
Well, yeah, and that's another thing, that time is limited for everyone. And what you're saying is something that people should be hearing, which is at every level of the business, the most important thing is I have something I can sell and make money from.
Yeah.
Because the bottom line is a manager and an agent aren't teachers. That's not what their job is. Their job is to get products made. And the only way that that's going to happen is if when you're coming to them with the best version of your script you're capable of putting together, which you cannot determine in a vacuum. You have to get feedback. You have to listen to people. If people are confused by what you wrote, you have to pay attention to what they're getting confused by. And you might go out with a piece before it's ready. We've all done this. Lucas has done this. I've done this, I have a good idea. I've been a little down the road with developing it, but it's not fully there. But I don't know that because I haven't gotten enough feedback from other people whose opinions I trust. We all like to think early on when I got my first manager and agent, and I was in my early 20s, I think I had this idea of like, they're going to work with me and they're going to develop my material and we're going to have this kind of, no, at the end of the day, you have to spend your time, you have to sell what people are buying at the end of the day, right? Your time is limited. So when you get material in, maybe I'm a manager or an agent and you send me Jojo Rabbit. And I'm like, well, great, but you're not Taika Waititi. So yeah. I don't know if I can like send this out and, this is a harder stone to push uphill. It's great. Maybe after you set up a couple of things, maybe we can send that out. The truth of the matter is, unless you're going to do it yourself, unless you're going to go out there and make some sort of micro budget thriller or something like that, at the end of the day, you have to write material that everyone in the movie ecosystem thinks they can attach a director to, get a studio interested in, get an actor to respond to, get financiers who want to put up money for. That's the bottom line. They're not going to go, well, let me work with you and try to make, no. That's like, they don't have time to do that. That's why there are other people that you should go to before you go to those people, because you're also not going to get, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. Dan, I don't know how many times like a writer's come to you and it's like, it's good, but it's not great. It's, you know, it's, there's no great idea. The writing's okay. And you'll read 3 more scripts from that writer. Like in your mind, I'm sure there's a big whiteboard and you're like, you know,
I hustled a ton of reads before I was ready and I regret it.
I would say this, like, Charlie, your answer is spot on. It just kind of makes me smile and laugh at the same time. There's definitely writers that have sent me things prematurely before they've really realized, like, hey, this probably should have had another pass. And I think that sours anything that comes from them going forward. And that's unfortunate, but that's just the reality. I think for me, in terms of the clients that I have for a script, generally to get to the point where I'm excited to take it out. And I have to be excited. If I'm not excited, it's not going to happen. Whether that's good or bad or whatever, that's just how it works for me. I think something needs to be at least like a 78, 80 on that first draft. And we're trying to get it to a 90 plus. If we get to a 90 plus, then at least I feel good about putting it out there. Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything's going to happen, but it's confidence to go to market, go to the fans, get people interested, and potentially get reads that lead to an option, a sale, meetings, whatever.
Well, and people are going to judge your credibility and your taste by what you're sending them. So unless you, like you just said, I am personally excited about this material. At the end of the day, if it doesn't meet that bar, and it's completely subjective, that bar, you know, if it doesn't excite me, how am I going to go out there and sell, you know, the milkshake machine for McDonald's unless I'm like really excited about that thing? You need that enthusiasm because it is all 99 times out of 100, they're going to pass. But if they read it and they're like, you know what, Dan, you know, the idea wasn't really for us, but man, this guy, his characters were great. And I love the tone and the action was phenomenal. Next time you have something from this writer, please let me know. And then you can go and say, okay, writer, you know what? They didn't respond to this idea. Let's talk about some ideas because they clearly like your writing. We'll find the right thing. That's important to do.
For me, all I have is my taste and my work ethic. That's it. Like, I don't have some inflated sense of self that I'm this guru or cool guy that people want to hang out with or super connected or any of those things. It's,
how do you describe your taste?
I mean, there's,
what are some famous movies that you like, that you would say, this speaks to my soul, I wanted to be in the movie business because I saw this movie?
Sure, I'll give you a few moments in time in my life. So I'm about to be 36. So my first movie I saw in theaters was Home Alone. Great, classic. Do I do movies like that? No. Seeing Jurassic Park in theaters with my father, summer of '93. I'm 6 turning 7. Seminal moment. Great, blockbuster, awesome. Going to see, I made a fake ID to be able to sneak in to see Road to Perdition. A really good movie, not necessarily a fantastic film, but that's kind of like who I am. I think Gladiator, I saw that like 5 times in theaters. Going to see American Beauty, like just like awesome moments in time for me growing up.
What about that movie? Because I love that movie.
American Beauty?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, playwright. So it's incredible dialogue. It's incredible character work. It evokes so many different emotions. It's so simplistic, but it's not simplistic at all. There's so much to unpack there. And I think about that. So that comes out, what, like 99, give or take? I'm 13, seeing it at 13 versus seeing it at 25 and 35. Each one of those viewings evokes a totally different experience.
It's so interesting because I didn't realize how much older I am.
You based on those references, American
well,
Beauty,
because yeah, really, because I was born in '74. So when I was, my seminal movie experiences were the early '80s, E.T., early Star Trek movies, Star Wars movies, then things like Aliens and RoboCop. But those are the things I saw as a kid. What happened when I was in college, I was introduced to older stuff. And I had a friend who was a huge Peckinpah guru. He ended up getting an Oscar nomination for a Peckinpah documentary. He was a really good filmmaker. If you asked him, he would have told you all day about how good he was. It's an old Rickles joke. So I watched like The Wild Bunch and Straw Dogs because of him. And then I took some film classes at Amherst, and first time I ever saw Chinatown, first time I ever saw Double Indemnity. I was sort of a film snob because I was publishing a magazine about film scores. So I was going backwards. And for me, like, I will watch Rosemary's Baby 100 times because each time you just see something different. Same thing with Chinatown, same thing with Wild Bunch, same thing with Blade Runner. So it's funny, these things that I hold up at the pedestal are like these dark, freakish things that would never, ever be made now, ever.
No, but it's interesting because Dan's generation is the, Pulp Fiction, Forrest Gump, Gladiator, American Beauty, early to mid 90s is when you started to really pay attention to movies and see how they kind of connected to you.
100%. I think there's two other moments in time. So I went to the University of Maryland in College Park for undergrad, and it's right outside of DC. And there's a couple, like highbrow indie, like AFI type theaters in that area. And like, if I was having a bad day or whatever, I would just leave campus and I'd just go see like something from Sundance or like some kind of international foreign language film. And I think like that escape of being able to like get away from the drinking, the drugs, the whatever, all the partying and stuff of being in a fraternity, but to have like a little burst of culture, that kept me going. And I think like steered me in a certain direction. And then there was the summer before my senior year, me and a guy who's now a working writer director out here, we rented a townhouse and we had no money whatsoever, but we lived above a video store. So we just would rent like 3 or 4 movies every night and watched everything. And it's like, you don't think of it at the time, and maybe I haven't even thought about it ever, but just thinking about it right now, it's like, shit, excuse me.
My kids are
here. That really served as some kind of like foundation for my interest, love, and professional like investment in filmmaking.
Do you remember any of the films?
Oh, anything you could think of, anything from like every Godfather to all the Rockies, Scorsese in the 70s, all the Star Wars films, like every classic you could possibly mention. I think we did like every AFI, top 100. So it was like a little bit of everything. And obviously I didn't love everything that I saw, but I think I could appreciate why it was considered good or why it was important or what the filmmaker was trying to say with what they were doing.
And don't you miss those days? I miss those days, those early days when I'm just discovering all that stuff in your sort of like late teens, early 20s, and your taste is being formed and you're watching all these things. I agree with you. A lot of the stuff that's vaunted and you watch, you're like, it didn't connect with me. But then there were other things that were just kind of amazing. And you're right. We do sort of create our foundation for our tastes and what we want to emulate from that period. I grew up reading comics. I loved comics. Now, I never would have imagined in a million years that would have been a skill set when I became a Hollywood development executive, and that became the single biggest genre that kind of like, destroyed every other genre. But I just like that. And so that's the kind of stuff you can't fake. You either have to know it or you don't. Yeah. Same thing with just the love of movies in general. You have to know these things. And even if you grew up in that era, like you said, of Gladiator and American Beauty, people do mention Godfather. People do mention certain touchstone films, and it's up to you to educate yourself so you know what the references are when you're in these development meetings with
100%,
people.
Yeah. And I wouldn't call myself like a cinephile, but I think movies and TV bring me joy, and I know that when they are done at their best, that they can really do great things for people. I know we're not saving lives here in a literal sense, but I think that there's something really important to making great shows, making great films, and what that can do for people around the world. And maybe I'm giving the industry too much credit, but I think it's a part of everyone's life in some way. I mean, to varying degrees, but I don't know anyone that doesn't watch TV or watch movies, right? Like,
Well, we
maybe-
all have our favorites, right? Our comfort food movies. I don't know what your guilty pleasures or comfort food movies are, but like my daughter, the 21-year-old daughter, and I can't tell you how many times she's watched the Richard Curtis movie About Time. Now, I don't know if either one of you have seen the movie.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's one of those movies. It's like, it's not a gigantic movie. It wasn't like a super hit or anything like that, but there's something about that movie that really speaks to my daughter, and she will watch it over and over again, and at the end will be just as walloped by the emotional climax as ever. And it is about, you know, bringing people on some sort of journey, whether it's emotional, whether it's visceral, you know, if it's an action or a suspense thriller, maybe it's about that. If it's a romantic comedy, you know, it's about the relatability. And in terms of endearment would be another great example. It's a movie that I've watched a number of times, and I'm not a woman, but it's about a mother and a daughter. And James L. Brooks is not a woman. Larry McMurtry, who wrote the book, is not a woman. But yet that movie is so profound and seminal and effective, and hits you emotionally at such a powerful level that, as writers, I think, whether you're Lucas, me, or anybody out there, you watch that and you're like, damn, I wanna be able to write something that's as powerful as that affects people. And I'm sure you, Dan, if you read a screenplay like that affects you that emotionally, like whether it's laughing out loud or something, or gasping if you're reading a screenplay, or like you get to the end of it, you actually kind of misty-eyed. Inevitably, you're like, okay, something in that is pretty powerful. That guy just got on my radar, because I know how hard it is to do that with the written word, right?
I remember reading John Spate's version of Passengers for the first time. It was early in my career, and it was printed out. It was like bound in like the CAA or like red like cover and backing. I read it from start to finish, and I cried at the end. And you know, you could say whatever you want about the finished product as a film, but John's version of that script was beautiful, and it really resonated with me, like what a writer at like maybe some of the highest of heights could do on the page with something that feels like, oh, it's just, you know, Titanic in space. But the nuance and detail to the characters and their relationship, it was just, it hit me in a way that's like, wow, I need to be chasing things like this. Even if I only find one every couple of years, this needs to be the proverbial carrot at the end of the stick, because when you find it, it's going to bring you joy beyond the money and whatever. It's going to satiate things beyond the scope of, hey, this is just a job.
And that's a great example, Passengers, because that's one of those screenplays that it didn't get sold and made in a year or two. It took a long time. It went through a lot of iterations before that movie finally got produced. And as you said, you can argue with the final product versus the original movie script that got everybody very excited about it. But the reason it eventually got made was because it got passed around. Everybody talked about it. It was a legendary unproduced screenplay that had like big name actors attached. Keanu Reeves was connected to it for a long time. And that's the kind of stuff that resonates with people. Got Spates all kinds of jobs. You know, he worked for Bruckheimer a lot. And so, yeah, maybe it'll take some time for that movie to finally get made. But it connected with so many people. And that happens a lot to the Blacklist scripts too, which is something will make the Blacklist. It's weird, it's quirky. Usually they're these kind of offbeat biopics, right? The sort of Alexander and Karaszewski kind of scripts. And they don't all get made immediately, but a lot of them do sort of over time. They kind of like attract elements. You know, it's important to have a piece of material that will attract a director or attract actors, and it might take some time. But if you're investing it with that ineffable quality that we're discussing, that connects to people when they read it, all right, I'm not going to make Jojo Rabbit now. But boy, the voice of this writer is like so interesting. I want him on my writing staff, or I want, what else do you got, kid? Right? That's key to building a career.
Yeah, voice is so important. Not to like kind of shift, but people ask like, what are you looking for? And I think it's like, if I could boil it down to like one sentiment, it's if 100 people write the same script, is yours the one that stands out the most? And to me, that's voice. Like, what do you have to say, and how are you going to shape it on the page? What's the way that you bring nuance, detail, and sophistication in a way that it makes something wholly and completely your own, rather than a lesser than version of what's been done, or, oh, you're riffing on Tarantino or the Coen brothers. It's like, no, who are you? What do you have to say? And some people struggle with that concept of what voice is. I think it takes some time to develop, nurture, grow, whatever. Sometimes it's, the younger writers, I think they just somehow have it. And it's like, wow, like you don't even have any life experience. How the F do you have this? And then there's people further along where it's like, it took them a long time to really hone in on what that looks like. And it just kind of, it happens, and it's really beautiful to see.
It's tricky too, because it's not necessarily the kind of thing that you can self-consciously create. It's something that is an alchemic process. Like, whenever we all start writing, right, the first thing that we're inspired by are the things that we like. And we usually do iterations of those things that we like. And hopefully, if we're good over time, our sensibilities will sink into that material and we'll make it our own. And it'll be a gradual process over a number of scripts. That's the other thing, Dan, we talk about, is that nobody's first script probably is going to sell. 5 scripts in, 7 scripts in, maybe you finally learned enough and you get to that point, but it's rarely that first screenplay. But voice is something that takes some time to find. And sometimes it's evident pretty quickly, like you said. Napoleon Dynamite is an interesting example of like what a weird, crazy, offbeat comedy that Jared Hess created, and it still stands up all these years later. It's kind of stands outside of time, as this really interesting piece. You could argue that, well, maybe lightning struck and he was never quite able to kind of capture that again. But there was something about that was very interesting, and he did that early on. And then sometimes it takes a little bit longer to get there, and it's case by case. It changes with every individual. And then there's hacks, right? There are people who they don't have really any voice at all. They can kind of come in and they can kind of like, they're the fender muffler guy and they're the mechanic and they can fix things, but it's not like, there are certain big writers who make a lot of money who are good at kind of the mechanics, but not necessarily, they're not Aaron Sorkin. They don't have the voice or the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Charlie Kaufman. I mean, there are those people, but
I'll tell you, everybody listening out there, focus on people, not on plot. That's the key. People, amateur scripts, they're too plot heavy, they're too plot complicated, because that's how people learn. They're just trying to figure out what is a story, what needs to happen. So they think of things to happen, and then they try to make them all fit together. But then if you get to a certain level, you can do it automatically because you've had so much practice. You don't need to think about plot points and all the stuff you're setting up. Then you start to think, wait, this person who I suggested exists. What would this actual person want? What would this actual person feel? What would an actual person do? And then you're starting to reconceive your work. And then you realize this whole script is garbage. I should just do a new script based on this interesting person. So it's a process. So is that true or super true?
It depends.
If I'm wrong, please tell me, because I'm
not going to say you're wrong. I think there's exceptions to everything. But I would say if you had to pick one over the other, I'm personally looking for strong character work more than I'm looking for really interesting or strong plotting. I mean, conceptually, the idea needs to be cool, but foundationally, the characters have to be great. So if we did like boil it down to like one over the other, if you have a good story with terrible characters, no one's going to care. There's nothing to kind of anchor that emotional investment. It may feel cinematic when you're reading, but I don't know if it's going to have the substance or the depth to justify moving forward as a viable project.
I will say, as devil's advocate, though, that if I had 2 scripts in front of me, one had a fantastic idea, but kind of middling execution, and the other one was a middling idea with excellent execution, I can get more traction for the sale with the excellent idea with middling execution, because you can hire 1,000 great screenwriters to rewrite that great idea, and finding great ideas is hard. The middling idea with excellent execution is a good writing sample, which is true. And maybe if that writer gets enough work down the line, they're like, well, remember that, that script that you thought was kind of a middling idea? but it's really well executed. I want to write and direct. I want to do that movie, and then you're Dan Fogelman, and you do something like that. But it might take some time to get there.
The great idea is always going to linger, even if the execution isn't there. I think it will make that impression that people will always think about it, wonder what happened and whatnot. So I do agree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there any way, I don't mean to be a jerk about this, but it's the secret sauce. Is there a way you can explain and articulate how you make the emotion better when you're working with your clients? That's not proprietary, that's not specific to somebody's script. If it's too hard, it's too hard, or too weird.
I would say it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. I'm not going to give myself so much credit to say that I'm the difference between someone selling something and not. The people that are doing the best, yeah, they buy in for sure, but they're generally the most talented, and I can't teach that. My job is to get the strongest performance out of the most talented folks. And I think that's the reality of the business, that someone that's great to work with, eager, but they just don't have it. I hate to equate to sports because that's like my background, but like the guy that's 7 feet tall, the guy that can throw 99, they're going to get every shot in the world because they have raw ability.
Right.
And I think that's what I'm looking for the most, is someone that has the talent to get there that I just need to mold. I can't make someone jump 2 levels as a writer. I can position their career so that it navigated in a way that makes the most out of that talent, but it's their talent, not mine, that's going to get them there.
Okay. I asked for a lot of reasons, but I have a huge amount of empathy for the thousands and thousands of people. I mean, literally 5 to 10,000, probably more, because there are 5 to 10,000 people enter the contests, and those are just the people doing the contests. I just have so much empathy for these people who are devoted to this, who we just know as a matter of numbers are never going to make it. And I feel like I'm one of them. You know, I go through periods when I'm telling my wife, honey, I think I was wrong. I think I might have messed up. I might have messed up my life. I might not have had the talent that I thought I had. And I'm sorry, because I'm a father and a husband now. And sometimes I make money, but I don't make as much money as I would have had I just given up on screenwriting. So, you know, it sucks on the one hand, it's very difficult, but, you know, I got to say, like, I have been let down by the Blacklist service, and it just happened again. And if you're friends with Franklin, or if you don't want to comment, you don't have to comment. I'll just, you know, chatter. I have a piece of material that is, that I think is ready for the marketplace. And I had one reviewer give it a 7 and the other reviewer give it a 4. And I believe it's because it's subversive. And I think the person who gave it a 4 was just looking at the surface of it and was not looking at the way it was critiquing what it actually looked like it was about. It's a horror movie. And I was wondering, would a Clockwork Orange fly today? Would Paul Verhoeven's movies fly today? Would things that are about nasty people and right-wing people, but weird, but critiquing it, but being subversive about it, would those fly at the lowest level of those gatekeepers? And I honestly believe, based on my experience with the Blacklist website, where it's like a slot machine, I get to put a $100 bill in each time, that I've been let down. I think that it hasn't worked. And I'm talking to you as somebody who's disappointed and sort of at a crossroads. So I don't know if there's anything you can even say, but that's what's going on with me.
I mean, I'm going to speak very candidly, and I'm not saying this to you, but just generally to writers. And not the idea of just writing and showing up and doing it doesn't mean that you get to be paid hundreds of thousands to do it, right? Like, you truly have to be great, because yes, while there is artistry to it, it's still a business at the end of the day. And that's how many decisions are made, or most decisions are made. And yes, there is a world where things are just truly art and it's not about the monetary return. But for the most part, things are done because they can potentially make those that invest money. So that's part of it. I think for the Blacklist, I was a reader for the Blacklist for years, and I read many scripts. And I think there's a subjectivity to it that mirrors the realities of the business. Even the best script, say a script that I sold for a couple $100,000, if I took it to 60 people, 8 maybe raised their hand in terms of wanting to do it. And that's a lot. That's a lot of people, 8 out of 60. So the reality is that even if you have a great script, it may be a 7 or 8 to some people, but it could be a 4 or 5 to others. 2 reads is not indicative of whether something is good or bad. If you've got 100 reads on the blacklist, at that point, if you think your script is really good, then you probably should have an average score of a 6 to a 7 or above. If it's mostly 4s, it's probably not that good. I just think that the answer is 2 is too small of a sample size to say, like, oh, it is a slot machine or whatever. It's just reality of how things work in the industry, that not everyone raises their hand for things that ultimately go on to sell. So to get a 4 on a script that is good is not uncommon.
And as we all know,
I was going to make a joke. Charlie's going to do one of my
go ahead.
jokes.
Sorry, make the joke.
I was going to say, sorry, that's incorrect, but it's blown now. It'll never happen.
No, I was just going to say whether it's Home Alone or Back
Home
to the
Alone
Future.
put into turnaround.
Yeah, Home Alone, Back to the Future, Forrest Gump. One of the very first, literally, I think the very first professional script that I read when I started for Simpson Bruckheimer in 1989 was a script called Forrest Gump, written by a writer named Charlie Peters. Now, Charlie Peters was not the writer credited when the movie finally got made. That was Eric Roth. But the idea, the concept, the character, the tone were all there. Everything was different about it. Like literally every single set piece, everything was different about it. But I remember reading it at the time going like, this is fantastically entertaining. It's like a cross between Being There and The World According to Garp. It was really interesting. Now, it took another 4 or 5 years for that project to get made at Paramount. And I don't know how long it was in development prior to that, because it was based on a book. But it went through a lot of iterations and it eventually got made. This is of no comfort to somebody who's trying to eke out a living in real time. You don't want to be discovered like, Picasso after you die or whatever. But the truth of the matter is sometimes it does take some time. And I'll even say, obviously even great is subjective, right? I could read something that I think is great and somebody else could go, I don't get it. Like, I just don't get it. The most important thing is to match your material with a person whose sensibilities align with the material, because that's the way you're going to sell it. You have to find, maybe you wrote a screenplay and, Paramount and Universal and Disney all passed on it, but A24 effing loves it because that's what A24 makes, or Neon, or one of those kind of companies. And, so if you're a manager, and you read something like that, you might be like, oy, there's only a couple of places where I could sell something like this. I wish you gave me something that was more commercial, that I had more buyers for. But those places do make movies. And so maybe the path that script takes or that project takes, it took, 13 years for the Black Swan, the Aronofsky movie to finally get made. And when it got made, it made a fortune. It's a weird movie. And if you look at the numbers it did in sheer box office, you'll be surprised. It made a lot, but it wasn't evident to everybody 13 years earlier. Otherwise, everybody would have been jumping all over it. So
this has been a much more difficult, far harder and more competitive and more brutal business than I could have possibly imagined. My naivete was just insane. I was just completely foolish. I really had no idea. I wish I had known.
Well, a lot of people wouldn't even do it if they knew how hard it was, right? I mean, that's why a lot of us get into it at an early age. Like, I started, the first script I wrote was in high school. I was probably 17 years old and I didn't even know proper form. And it was before the internet. It was hard to find what a format of a script looked like. And I'd say, I think we've talked about this in a previous show, from that script to the time I got a real deal, like a Hollywood deal with a real company and a real agent, was probably 7 scripts in, from like 1984 through when I finally got an agent in like 1991 or 1992. It took time. It took 7 or 8 years of like.
So that's really when Dan was 5, you mean?
Yeah. When Dan was 5.
I was just thinking that.
but that's the
Dan's like, I'm in the kindergarten. I'm a big boy.
That's the backstory, I think, of so many writers. When you see, like, when Zach Galifianakis broke through with Hangover, right? Right before The Hangover, he had done a movie for us called G-Force. He was like the lead human actor in G-Force. Nobody had heard of Zach Galifianakis at that point, and it was before Hangover. And he had been on the margins of Hollywood in one form or another for a full decade before Hangover got made, right? So he's the overnight success. He's like suddenly a superstar, but it was like, no, he's been scratching out a living for like 10, 11 years, trying to figure out how to make it work. And by the way, he's one of 1,000, in terms of people trying to break in through Hollywood. So I guess, as Lukas is saying, it's so competitive. One of the keys is try to get in as early as you can, because it's going to take some time for you to get there. And if you don't have a lot of encumbrances upon you early on in your life, you're still single, you haven't had kids or whatever it is, you have more time to figure it out, because those are the years it's going to take to put in the sweat equity before you finally make it one way or another. Maybe a better question is, for any of us, how do you know when to hang up the dream? How do you know when to go, you know what, I'm going to go work for Allstate. I can't figure this out anymore. Or do you ever put it on the shelf, and you're always writing on the side until eventually, like Stephen King, you're writing your book on a yellow pad in the laundry room of your trailer as an elementary school teacher, and hope that it's going to sell?
I think doing whatever you can to stay in the game is the best way to find success. And maybe that's less so for writers, but more for people on my side of things. I remember when I started out, I worked for an A-list producer who passed away, and his advice to me, I was like, how'd you do it? I'm like, how'd you go from like some fat guy in Philly to like being an Academy Award winning producer? And he's like, I just didn't give up. And he wasn't like a rich guy. He didn't go to film school, wasn't super connected. He just kept showing up. And I think like,
How's he
that's
doing
not
now?
going to always breed success for everyone, but I think it motivates me in the sense that like maybe I'm not quite at the point in my career where I was like, oh, I've made it. Everyone knows who I am. Not that I want that, but I like to get further than I am right now. And I think so long as I say the course, put in the time, keep working, it will continue to happen. But things definitely have broken my way. And I think that speaks to the why you keep showing up.
How'd they break your way? What happened for you?
How did I break in?
No, I mean, how did things go from the point where you were sending emails to me and then they took off? I mean, did you get lucky with some clients, or did you just have an accumulation of good fortune?
Being nice to you is no indication of where I was at.
But I don't know that. I mean, I'm just saying, did you have a moment where you were like, honey, it's going to be okay?
I think in the last 2 years, things have really sped up in terms of diving more into TV, leaving the company I was at to partner with Derek Epic at Empirical, and just learning from him. He's 7 years older than me. He's kind of seen things, and it's just like actually having that mentor to kind of show me the way of things to make it a little bit easier. We've been lucky. Clients have progressed. Deals have gone our way. We've gotten the benefit of the doubt. It seems like really positive. And I think it's just hard work and dedication. I know that sounds so stupid and simplistic, but it's not like I've done anything truly different. I think I try to see things from both a macro and micro perspective, maybe not spend so much time on developmental clients that really aren't matching my efforts. But really, it's the top level clients that are making that next step forward. And sometimes it's one project now is 5 projects for them. And that adds up pretty quickly.
And I also think it's important, because you just mentioned it earlier, which is nobody owes you a living, right? Unless you're incredibly lucky, you're going to need hard work, perseverance, and talent. That's going to precede probably any success that you have, unless you're incredibly lucky. There's always the guy who wins on the first screenplay or wins the lotto, but that is even in a town full of competition where the odds are so high. If you talk to anybody who's actually succeeded, the hard work, perseverance, and talent were all a prerequisite for the opportunity that finally came along and gave you the chance at success.
I will say this, like, I am exceptionally lucky in the sense that what led me out here was surviving stage 4 cancer. And it's been 10 years now of clean health. And I think having that to draw from along the way of like, hey man, you're living with house money. It's
Yeah.
allowed me to kind of bet on myself and take some calculated risks and not be so fearful about things. And it allows me to maybe have a perspective about life that, I don't know, maybe slightly makes it a little bit easier. I don't know, but I do think having gone through that has helped shape my journey for the last decade.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
No, that's very meaningful, and we're glad you're alive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For me, it was that my wife and I beat infertility, which I put in that little
I
bio
love
video.
that story, Lucas. That's like, I teared up when I heard about that. That was really
They're
cool.
the joy of my life. There'll be 8 next week. We were basically told, the doctor said it was not working for us. It was a big mess. And the doctor said, I'll try one more time for you nice people, and then you're gonna, have to do something else. And on the very last viable embryo ever, we had identical twins.
That's
And there were people at the fertility clinic who said, they said every year there's one miracle, and this year it's you.
that's awesome.
So that's why I don't care about the blacklist. By the way, when Dan finishes that drink, there's a 5-year-old girl in the closet, and the oxygen runs out. Well, all right, we're back, and we were just making jokes that you'll never hear because we cut them. But I want to go back to, we were just making fun of, I won't say which service, but the fact that there are, look, in the gold rush, who made all the money? The people selling the shovels. And there are so many people selling shovels. And I feel like I can't antagonize them because they could have made my career. They could have made me money if they'd said, hey, this guy's good. We should kick this out to people like Dan. But they don't, because who knows why? Who knows why? I don't know why. But mostly it's because the same people writing the scripts are also reading them, because that's where they're hiring their readers. And these people don't know. They don't know what's really a great script. That's, I swear, that's the truth.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think it is important, if you're a writer, we've talked about this on other shows, to find the people who can give you productive feedback on your script, because not all feedback was created equal. You want good feedback. If somebody doesn't know what the hell they're talking about and they read your screenplay and they send you off in bizarre directions, you need to have a group of, a handful of people whose tastes and opinions and talent you trust, and get, sort of a sense from all of them of what's working, what's not, try to triangulate from that. But you owe it to yourself to do that before you're going to send any material out there to anybody, because you're not going to get multiple chances with it's going to be hard enough to get your script to somebody like Dan to begin with, and once it gets in his hands, you got one shot. Make sure that it's the best shot you're capable of coming up with. But wait until you have that.
Yeah, look, I don't want to spend people's money for them, but there are other ways to do it. Like I have clients, and I know a lot of working writers that have reps that are in writers groups, and they just do it to help each other so that they have a sounding board of trusted voices that know how to give good notes, so that something is at a higher level before it goes into the reps.
Oh,
the higher the bar for that first draft of something, the better chance it has to become something truly viable. The more the reps are going to be excited and put in the time and the effort to get it there. I know people that are repped at like big places that they spend the money, work with script doctors, just so that like they can exhaust every possibility to give themselves the best chance.
I wanted to say,
go ahead.
Well, Charlie's a very good script reader and consultant. But before I forget, I went through the studio notes process. I had a co-writer who's a showrunner for Dick Wolf. So this was a real script, and we had an option from SDX. We went through development. We went through notes. I had the experience of getting real studio notes, and then I didn't know how to do them. My partner, Robert, he ended up doing 90% of them. I was learning, but the notes that you get from professionals are nothing like the notes you get from We Screenplay or any of these places. Right. They are there for repeat business. I mean, they're like a psychic hotline. They're not. It's not going to really help you. I'm sorry, because there've been, like, I like Tom Dever from Coverfly. He'll probably never talk to me again, but he's a good dude.
I will say also, like, I never hawk my service, and I'm not going to even do it now. All I'm going to say is try to find somebody like me, somebody who has the experience, somebody who's worked with, big screenwriters, somebody who understands the studio development process, somebody who's actually created big films. If you can find somebody like that, if you're serious about this, if you really want to do this, then you owe it to yourself to try to find somebody, if not me, like myself, that can help you guide your way to coming up with something that is gonna put your best foot forward when you go to people like Dan. And there's only a handful of those people. I can tell you, Dan can tell you that too. The vast majority of the script industrial complex are not people who have actually worked in the business, who have actually made big films. You owe it to yourselves to do the due diligence, find out, look at their resume, ask questions, and only then part with your money. But it is probably worth doing if you're very serious about wanting to try to make this a career.
And Charlie is very good. Go to scriptgenius.com. We'll put it in the
and I'll even say this right now, all truth. Like, I'm super busy as a writer right this second, so like I don't have a ton of time to do it. So my time is limited. But yes, please check out the website when you can. There's a lot of interesting stuff on there. Would love to hear from you.
Charlie, there's someone I might put on your radar that's not my client, but like is looking for someone like you. And obviously I never met you or even spoke to you before today. I vaguely know your background, but just hearing you speak, and I'm not saying this to kiss your butt for what, but like, I know that you're legit just talking to you. And that is so
thanks,
clear. Dan. Like when you meet with people that like say, oh yeah, it's like so easy to suss out the BS. So I really appreciate it. Like I love that you're putting yourself out there from the background that I kind of get. Like, wow, like people are lucky that you're doing this kind of thing because I'm sure you're making their work better.
Well, listen, there are some people out there that were lucky enough to have relatives in the business, and then there were us, people who had to figure it out some other way. And the majority of the business is not nepotism. There's a percentage, but the vast majority of us are just people who grew up loving movies and TV and wanting to figure out, how do I get to be part of that world? And out of that big group of people, there's a very small percentage at the end of the day that beat the odds, that stayed true to the passion, that got a couple of lucky breaks, and that had a little bit of talent. And so, and all of our paths are different. Every one of them is different. So when people ask, how do you get in? It's like, all we can tell them is like, here's what I did. Hopefully you'll come up with your own variations on that. And God, the business has changed dramatically since I got into it in the late 80s, since Lucas and you got into it in the early to mid 90s.
I'm from Martha's Vineyard and I went to Amherst, so I cheated.
You're a little bit of an elite, but yeah.
All right, I have a bone to pick with you, Dan. Very trivial.
Okay.
This happens sometimes where, I don't know if it was you, I think John Zawzieri from Bellevue on a couple of occasions has had an amateur writer like cross the line, like show up at his house or send something to his house or call his cell phone. And obviously, like, that's not cool. But the way it was put on Twitter, to me, was punching down. And I was the only person who said, this is true. That person's absolutely an idiot, but that person's got enough problems and shouldn't be picked on by a professional. And I got attacked for being the only person who said that. And I just want to say I stand by that remark.
So I attacked you?
No, it wasn't you.
Oh,
it wasn't you, because I think one time maybe it was you, like hey, to the guy who just called my cell phone to pitch his script, don't do that. It's like, obviously that's true, but that led to a piling on by all the people who follow you. And to me, it was bullying, and it was a little ugly because I felt bad. I've cold called people. I cold called this morning a manager of a huge star who I want for one of my movies. And I called her business line thinking it would be an assistant. It forwarded to her cell phone, and I'm suddenly talking to the person whose client could unlock my computer. And I felt like a total.
How quickly before they hung up?
No. She talked to me. She was super cool. And she was all business. And then I said what I needed to say. And then I said, I'm so sorry. And I let her go. But these things happen. And I don't think people should be made fun of for hustling in a way that was ignorant. I just don't think they should be mocked.
I think that's fair. I
Very good.
trying to be mindful of it.
I accept your apology.
I would never explicitly put someone's name out there or do it in a hurtful way. I think the way that I've approached it in the past is putting it out there so that maybe other people don't make that mistake. And maybe there's a better way to position
I think
it.
you're right, but I think what happens is that all the writers who follow you, who want to show that they're cool, start to pile on to the person who did the dumb thing.
And I think that's why, like, when I make a controversial statement on Twitter at this point, I just put it on a setting so that no one can reply.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed or it even matters, but like, I've definitely pulled back from being as vocal on Twitter because of moments like that where people react the wrong way. And it's like, I use Twitter as a way to speak from my experience, to give anecdotal stories, to kind of show a peek behind the curtains without naming names or being explicit about, the involvement of a deal or what studio and whatnot. And that's my choice to provide that. And if people don't take it the right way, then I'll do less of it.
I learned a lot from your tweets, and I also learned a ton from John Zazierni's tweets.
Yeah,
he
John's
was really generous. I also noticed he was talking about Infinite like every single week, and then the second it got reviewed, that stopped.
We can connect the dots there.
All right. We're approaching the end. Thank you so much for being with us and for being candid and informative and fun. And
I think I cursed once.
you did. And I envy your hairline. Look what happens when you're 48. I hope you have that hair.
I don't even want to talk about it, Lucas.
I wear a hat too much, so I'm starting to go.
No,
Yeah.
that is great hair, dude.
Okay.
Yeah. But thanks, Dan. This has really been great. Thanks for your candid nature, your good humor, and a lot of smart things that hopefully people can take with them and think about.
I appreciate it, Charlie. Really, really great to meet you. And this is a fun conversation. I didn't know what to expect. So just
okay.
Really...
Well, we'll do it every day. Same time tomorrow.
All right. All right. Thanks, gang.
So let me sign off. Dan, I want to say goodbye to you after, but for all the people out there, we want to thank Dan Seco from Empirical Evidence for being super cool and forthcoming and joining us. I want to thank my co-host, Charlie, who's such a good guy, who's going through a death in the family, and God bless you. And so sorry to hear that. And to all the folks out there, please put your comments in the comments, which we will then ignore and never address. But we look at now how many comments there are, and that's very important. Okay, I'm joking. I'll always try to answer. Thank you, folks. And,
see you next time.
We'll see you next week. Okay. Bye.